And so I felt like I didn't like that feeling of being told you can't do something. Um, in another shoot, this is one of the models I've used quite a bit. I had her sit real pensively. And then, of course, in Photoshop, I combined the two. And now she is beyond the barricade, and she is sitting in the chair that she was not supposed to sit. No one was supposed to sit in. So in Photoshop, I removed the ropes and the "do not sit" sign. And so as you could look closer, maybe you could probably tell that she wasn't supposed to be in the chair, but at a glance, I can't tell. So anyway, I told that story. This was another one of my models, and she certainly didn't have the bird there. And the bird is actually not a live bird. It's I did this work with the bird cages, and it was a little ceramic bird that had stayed in one of the cages for a long time. And so as I saw the image and started working on her without the bird, she was supposed to, mean hope. And Emily Dickinson's "A Hope is a Thing with Feathers" was a poem she wrote, and that was what I was feeling. So I wanted to go find a bird, and actually all of the birds I had in my folder didn't seem to fit, and this one did, and so she's now holding the bird. It looks more like a painting, and the reason why is because I used a lot of texture and brush strokes in the Photoshop. Okay, this is a fun one. So this is taken in Ossabaw Island, Georgia, an incredible place that you can only visit if you're an artist or a writer or musician. It's in a foundation, and the state of Georgia owns it now. But so a group of artists and I went for a week, and the shelf was a shelf that was on over a mantle. And during the week, we collected things during our trip that meant something to us, and put them on that shelf. And so this is one of my friends, and I had her outside raise her arms like she was holding the shelf, and combine that image along with another one of my friends that's in the background in another room. So neither one of the girls were there together at the same time, or the shelf. So they all just made a statement together. And again, there's textures and layers on there. It kind of blends the images together. So that's kind of the story of that. This one is my niece, and so I made her a little angel, and I have her standing on one of my wooden blocks at my home. And the two angels come from a painting, which I think I have in my notes. I wrote it down, but I can't recall the name right now. And I just wanted to portray her as kind of a lead angel that had light, and again, lots of textures and layering there. This belongs to a series called The 3 Chapters of Illumination, God Calling. And I did a lot of work with the wolf, a real wolf, as well as using the wolf mask in this project. And the mask was to represent fear. And so I used, in this particular image, a child, another one of my nieces. And it's entitled Down and Out. And there's a lot of symbolism within that project and within the story about the wolf representing fear and our ability to overcome or let it take us places we don't want to go. So that's about that one. And this one was done, I was working with a group of women in Colorado, and she was wrapped in gauze, and we mudded her. And so she was doing different things, and I just took her out of the context of what she was doing, removed her, and she was leaning up against a wall, and I put her on the ladder. And then, interestingly enough, I've done a lot of work with my backdrops, and I photograph a painter's canvas, and then in Photoshop, I will add some of my other infrared images on top of it and blend it, so it actually looks like it's the backdrop, but it's actually, I actually have just a white canvas behind her. Well, she wasn't even there. So she was not there. So she was taken somewhere else, and the ladder was at my home, and the backdrop was at my home, and the image behind her was taken years ago, I think in my backyard. So the trick on this one was getting the light direction correct, which is mainly one of the biggest tricks in compositing there is, to make an image look seamless, and that it actually is an integral part of the work, is that the light comes from the right direction and the shadows are cast in the right direction. So this image was a lot of fun. I don't know who is really on the Zoom, if anybody does know me, but I'm an RN, I'm a nurse, ICU trained in trauma. And this was a student that I had working for me for summer as an intern, and I collect costumes. And one of the costumes I have collected and couldn't wait to use when the right person came around was this nursing student outfit. And so mainly this is a self-portrait, and was lucky enough to, across from my studio, there's some warehouse buildings that had this fabulous light, and this just stage, it was just staged beautifully. So I didn't have to do a lot of compositing here. I did the goldfish. So pretty much everything here is straight shot with some texturing, some light adaptations, and the goldfish that needs help. This is another one that I would love to say I worked on as a composite, but it is a straight shot. I did, when I say straight shot, for me, that means...
we weren't telling anybody that one.
Oh yeah, okay, oh yeah, I added her in, that's right, we were gonna sneak, no. But I think it's important to know that even when you do something that turns out surprisingly good, without having too much manipulation needed, I did manipulate the horizon line, and that changed the image from a dull, flat image, and it gave it a little bit, I don't know, the perspective was much better. Let's see, I took probably about probably about a thumb's width off of the sky, gave her a little bit more water. And then I worked on the clouds to make them feel like they were a little bit more seamless and not distracting, because there were some breaks in the clouds with more bright blue sky. And I just kind of wanted it to not detract from her. I did also work on the shadows and the reflections in the water some. So yeah, it's manipulated, but it was an easy one. Now this one is so much fun, and so it was taken at the same island that I mentioned before, the Ospa Island in Georgia. It's just a beautiful beach there, and it's just flat, and the water's flat. It's gorgeous, and a group of us just brought all kinds of crazy things with us, and champagne, and so we had a time just photographing crazy stuff. And so I have this, and I don't know if Bob will show it, but I have it as a deconstructed image, so you kind of see where it started and how it ended up. Of course, my friend who passed out from the champagne was not there in the original shot. The ladder was, and some of the fabric, but the pig was not. And the story behind the pig is that this island has had some pet pigs that liked us a lot. We fed him breakfast every morning, and so he became our mascot. So the title of the image is When Pigs Fly.
Yes, I'm going to be going through at the end of our presentation, both Fran and Anne Fran sent the progression files of how they are doing this work. So yes, you'll all get to see that. So this was the collection of work that Anne had in the show, and now the work that I'm going to be showing is of Fran's, and Fran can explain some of hers, and you'll be able to see from this work to the newer work that Fran has given us to share later on is quite different. So here we go. This is one of Fran's earlier pieces. But again, these were the pieces that were in our show.
So this piece is called Flying Boy over Churro's Pond. And the pieces actually were shot on Cape Cod by and large, except for the butterfly wings, which I found on my driveway at home, a dead butterfly, which I then scanned. And I worked very similarly to the way Anne worked, except that she's a much better photographer than I
That's
am.
not true. Oh my God.
But I also put pieces together, and like Anne, I do a lot of shooting and collect them into various different folders, and then pick and choose what I want in order to make the composite. So this figure, the boy himself, is actually three different photographs. One is the face and the jacket were from a cabinet card.
Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. The legs were from a different source, and the feet were from an old photograph of my father, which I then manipulated the feet in order to make it look like they were pointing down. There, that's right. So those were manipulated in order to look like he was more or less flying, but those shoes were actually from my dad when he was maybe 5 or 6 years old. The house in the background is on Cape Cod, and the pond, the sky, and the birds were shot at various different times on the Cape as well. And the boy in the very far background onto my right was the same boy from the original cabinet card. And there's a child peeking out from behind the building, which is right over there. Thank you. So she's from a different cabinet card. So this was created, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 years ago. It's a fairly old one. So the challenge here was to make it look as if he is somehow embedded into the butterfly wings. And the other challenge is, oh, go back one more second.
Sorry, Fran.
Okay. So if you go a little bit closer, the antennae on the, go up to his face. There had been some antennae on the butterfly, but I eventually took them out because they looked like little devil sticks coming out of his ear. So I eliminated those, but the rest was the actual butterfly. Parts of this were also shot on the Cape. The path is in Truro. The water I don't remember, but the building in the background was actually from Venice, which I shot in 1999 with my film camera. And that was on the Grand Canal. And the boat was shot also on Cape Cod, and the dog was lifted from a painting, which I photographed in a museum some years ago. Don't remember where. This picture, which is called Gondolier, has gone through many, many, many iterations and finally settled on this one. And like Anne, I also sometimes use textures as a way to integrate the various different components of the image. This was also very much a Cape Cod kind of image, except for the giraffe. The lighthouse was shot in Truro. That's the Highland Lighthouse, which some of you who know the Cape might recognize. And I've used that lighthouse in many, many different images. The giraffe was shot at in Dallas at the zoo in Dallas, and I was standing up on some sort of a mezzanine, and his head came right up towards me. Giraffes, I like to shoot animals, but of all the animals, giraffes are the easiest to shoot because they don't move very fast. So I was able to get quite a number of photographs of that beautiful creature. The woman sitting on the giraffe was from also a cabinet card. I think she was shot in the teens, the 19 teens. Then of course I colorized her and worked on her face, gave her a different set of shoes. And the ribbon I actually shot on my sofa at home because I wanted her to have a tie around the giraffe's neck. And I had an old black and white ribbon. So I was able to shoot that and then using Photoshop, manipulate it so it appears to wrap around the neck of the giraffe. And in the background, you'll see a horse-drawn cart. And that was a small metal toy that I bought actually from a flea market, also on Cape Cod. And I've used him a fair amount. And then the water, the sky, the clouds, those are many, many, many different shots taken from all over the place and then composited. So this particular image probably has bits and pieces of maybe 10 or 15 different shots. This is called Landing. This image is in my recent book. And the background also was shot on the Cape. It's one of the marshes, but the girls were shot separately. One girl was shot in Truro on Cape Cod, and the other girl was shot in Los Angeles. And the girl in the foreground, I composited her goggles and her leather hat, as well as her little tutu. And there's that same belt that I also reused. And the airplane, by the way, is obviously an old biplane, and that was shot in London at I forget, I think it was the Air and Space Museum. I'm not sure exactly the name of the museum. This is called Mirage, and this picture is pretty well known. It's been sold a fair amount. It's particularly appropriate for today, actually, for what we're going through now with the pandemic. It was created in 2016, and at the time I was dealing with a major health crisis for one of my family members. And I was unable to really work for a couple of months only because I was pretty upset about what was going on with my daughter. But then as things started to ease up, I got back to work again. And unbeknownst to me, after I created this, I realized that it's really a scene of hope, of striving, of memory. It has a lot of different pieces to it. And it particularly resonates with what people are feeling now. So as you can see, there's a young girl running towards an older woman who's holding a camera. And then in the background is a woman in a canoe. You're not sure what the mirage is. Is it the woman in the canoe or the woman holding a camera? But the young girl is holding a bird cage, and yet the bird has flown away and has escaped into some sort of sense of freedom. This is also, this one is called, I can't remember the name. I think it's
I did the same thing.
Offering of the Dove.
Thank you, Offering of the Dove. The dove. So she's offering. So this.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm learning.
So again, this is a composite of many, many different images. The bird cage, another canoe in the background. She's on water. You'll see that the theme of this particular series has a lot to do with water, and I think that's primarily because these images were shown on Cape Cod, where I spend a lot of time. But she's sitting on a bird cage, which seems to be drowning in some ways or falling into the water. So this is a reference to ecological disaster, but also a sense of savior and an escape from ecological disaster. And the woman herself is several different images. So she's composited too. The only thing that's not composited is actually the bird. And the bird was a dove that I shot actually with my iPhone on the High Line in New York some years ago. But the woman's face is from an old cabinet card, dress, and the arms were a friend of mine who was modeling for me. Another Cape Cod image. Those of you who are familiar with the Cape will recognize these cottages, which are on Route 6 between Truro and Provincetown. They're very iconic. But here I have a sense of anxiety and danger because of the darkness. But yet in the center between the two cottages is a bird with more that's sitting there, and then more birds flying up above. And that's the bay behind the two cottages, and a young man looking through one of the windows. So again, composited from many, many different images. This is called Wellfleet Night, and the house is actually my house in Wellfleet, taken at night. Very foggy, very lugubrious. This was created really to suggest danger, but also some sort of safety inside the safety of the house, where you see a young man looking out the window and these two strange figures, which are actually children wearing masks, that are standing in the yard under the light. This was a very early image. I think I did it, I don't remember, maybe 15 years ago. Again, composited from an old cabinet card, a painting of a hat, and then the background I actually created in Photoshop. So I created that three-dimensional panel and then added the water, which is flying up. This is called Lost Sailor. And I just thought this was very whimsical. I thought this was funny. At least I enjoyed making it. You'll notice that the same lighthouse that I've used before is in the background, illuminating the horizon over on the left-hand side. And the water, again, was shot at the Cape, as was the boat. But I wanted to suggest the illusion of a lost sailor who's actually trying to row in the grass with the water behind him.
Well, this is what this, the show that we had here consisted of. And probably at this point, if there's any of the images that people want a little more detail on, you can just let me know. And you can, again, if we ask you to just raise your hand, I can unmic you. And if not, then we'll just move on to show some of the newer pieces that we have available to see. And then the one thing that will be really quite amazing is seeing the progression of how these images are made. So any questions, comments so far that somebody may have? Everybody's happy? All righty.
Great stuff.
Fran, you're
I think it's
missing,
great.
your avatar is, on my phone, is a round circle and a half circle. Is Fran's picture not, can you see her, Bob?
I see Fran.
I'm here.
Okay.
You
Can
can't see
people
me.
not see Fran? If you can't see Fran, please raise your hand.
I'm here.
Okay.
I mean, I can see me.
I can hear you.
You can't see me.
Uh-uh.
Huh.
But Bob, you can see me.
Oh,
But
sorry.
it's okay. I mean, it's all right.
I just saw a couple hands raised. If you could raise them again. I believe, here we go. So Angela, I'm gonna unmute you. There we go. supposedly unmuting you.
All right, there we go. You said raise your hand if you can't see Fran, and I can't see Fran, but I was able to see the photography, the art, which is absolutely amazing. That's one. Two, I raised my hand earlier because I think you have two microphones on. Because if you turned off everybody's microphone except for your own, we're getting feedback from a microphone.
Am I feeding back or is Fran feeding back?
You.
I am.
But in any case, I'm keenly interested in seeing the layering of this work.
Okay.
Incredible.
Well, we will continue. I hope everybody can get this. And I believe, Arthur,
Yes.
you have a question.
No, I was trying to figure out the hand.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm sorry, but I really enjoyed the pictures though.
Not a problem. So let's continue on with some of the newer work that was sent. So, excuse me, we'll start here with Anne, a new piece that she sent. If you'd like to let us know about this one, Anne, please.
Okay, I was in Santa Barbara with my dear friend Joyce Wilson, and we went up on, it's an old house, I guess, but it really wasn't a house. It was like a castle. I don't know if any of you have been there. I think Rana's on here, and I think she's been up there. It's just gorgeous, and there's coves and holes, and the light is beautiful, and the scenery is gorgeous, and we had a model with us, and I just kind of selected her in a hole. So, and I don't think I sent, Bob, did I send this deconstruction on this one? No, I don't think I did. But it's amazing because it looks nothing like this. She's in bright sun, and she's got on a white gown, and she's in this cove. And so when I looked at her, she was really quite beautiful just as it was, but it didn't really tell a story. And so that's why I think that I composite, is because what I shoot may be good enough, but it doesn't say what I wanted it to say. And so what I kind of wanted this image to say is that there's these antique books that are underneath her, and there's some objects on the dresser. Can you blow those up just a little bit? I'm on my phone, guys. Sorry, my internet's down, so I'm on cell service. I can't quite see if you can see the name on them. I changed this image a number of times, but there is special books about where my family came from, and what's happened with this image is that over time things have been lost because we didn't document them, or we didn't tape our grandmothers or aunts, and most of my elders are all gone now, and that's the I guess the roots that have come up and kind of overgrown the books and the objects on the table. And then it's a self-portrait of me feeling like I'm in the hole, like, I've got to get this information and record it for the future. So if you notice, she has a key. Bob, go up to a little bit closer. Let me make sure I sent the right image if the key is showing on her waist. Right there, but and it's the knot. It's the knot of the key.
Yes.
Okay. So she's wearing a key, and most of the images the key was showing. I think this was on one view; it wasn't there, and I suppose I didn't want to put it in there when I made the image. But at any rate, that's kind of the story on that one, and that's kind of into my psyche about why when I pull up the images that I don't want to use the image I gotta just keep doing stuff to it. I don't know. I just have to have it tell a story, kind of like Fran was discussing, and how she she went in and collected, but then she went and scouted her collections to find just the right thing that's going to say what she wanted to say, just the right piece. You know, I think that's, I would like to hear from Fran if that's kind of what she thinks, is that the images are great, but they're not saying what I want them to say. And evidently, I just can't really get that in one shot in the camera. I have to take a bunch of them, put them together to say what I want to say. So that's that image. And this is a whole new genre, a whole new, and as you can tell, there's no texturing or layering, but I wanted you to see this image if you're interested in compositing, because it is a true work. Oh guys, this took so much work, but it was so fun. So this is done in studio lighting with the backdrop and the same model. And so what I had to do was put her in one chair, and whatever the message was in that chair. This is called Place at the Table. Oh my gosh, my battery's saying low. Oh Lord, let's hope we get through it without dying. As you can see, Place at the Table is a reference to life and the things that we go through in our trials. And so in the first chair, and I titled, well, each girl is like a symphony. So we're all in a, so I've labeled them first chair, second chair, third chair, fourth chair. Each one of these chairs has a whole nother body of work just for that one chair. So the first chair is, she's eating crow. So many of us, I hope I'm not the only one that's had to eat crow in her lifetime, but there's certain experiences I've had where, you know, I don't always do the right thing and I have to come back and say, I'm sorry. So that's this image. And so I differentiated it in the hat and her posing. And then the second one, she's having to swallow nails. So that's a bowl full of nails. I'm not quite sure how big. I'm on my little phone, so I'm not sure how big y'all can see, but they're brass nails. They're expensive nails. And the third image, if you'll notice, she has a holster and a gun, and she kind of looks like Marilyn Monroe. And in this, everyone can probably use their own experiences and put themselves in her position. But there has been times where I've wanted to shoot somebody. So some of you that know me know why. But still in all, she has not done that. So the gun had no bullets in it. And the last one is an homage to me. So I don't know if you know, I have MS. And my left side does not work. So I don't know if you guys, I can raise my right hand, but I can't raise my left one. And I limp a lot. I have what I call it is a hiccup in my giddy up. So I collected in a vintage antique of an old polio brace. And I've had it in my studio trying to figure out how I wanted to represent that part of my life and that struggle. And I mean, I think I've had that 6-7 years and never shot it. And when I was doing this work and telling the story in each one of these chairs, it was a perfect fit. And so the difficulty technically was putting these people together. Well, first of all, the first table, and remembering where everybody went and where what was on the table when I take the next shot. Nobody touched the table, And so at one point I had something in the middle of it, and I shot all number 1 and 2 with a bowl of something in the middle. And when I started looking at it, I go, oh gosh, that's got to go. Well, I didn't shoot it without it. So guess what? I had to call the model back I had to redo everything. And this time I learned a lesson, and I shot that table with no model with about 100 times to make sure that I could pull from it to fill in any parts that I needed. And there is no way that I could ever show a deconstruction on this one because the file is so huge that I probably have to have a whole nother computer to even manage it, how much work it took. But, and because I'm really not that good at doing it, there's so many more people that are proficient and know how to work, you know, but I just kind of go. And so my files get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So anyway, that's the story of that image.
Now here's some of Fran's new work.
These were all created over the past couple of weeks, and I'm very limited to what I can shoot. Mostly when I shoot, well, when I travel, that's when I do my shooting. So I haven't been able to do that. And I've had to rely on images that I have in my files and cannibalize the images that I have available. So these were all pieces of images that I've had kind of sitting around on my hard drive. The past 7 weeks has been a great opportunity to clean out my hard drive. But, but I feel like I'm coming to the end of my rope because I'm running out of things to work with, which is very frustrating. But all of these are composites, and they are all, as I said, parts of images that I've shot over the past many, many years. But also each one of them is a suggestion of the solitary isolation that we're going through right now. So I call this the time of Corona. This is the series. It's an ongoing series. Occasionally, every week or so, I post a new one on Instagram just to get a read to share my images with other people. This particular image was actually one of the child. That was actually shot in Norway when I was doing an artist residency a couple of years ago. But it seemed to work for now. Again, this one is slightly manipulated. This is not that one, but the next one is a composite. Actually, the building, like Anne, I'm also looking for interesting old architectural places to shoot. So this was a deserted house in the East Ham, actually, that I snuck into when nobody was there and was able to shoot it. And then, of course, did a lot of manipulation. The child and the little red wagon were composited into that, and the color was added as well. So this was actually 3 different files that were composited together.
That's beautiful.
Well, this is actually my house at night, and I added the 2 figures, one in the upper window and then a figure. Bob, that's actually Eileen in there, who I composited into.
Make it bigger for us, Bob, for my little
This
bad
is
eyes,
as-
my little phone.
This is as big as it's getting for whatever reason.
Okay.
Well, I didn't submit it as big as it.
Well, I mean, just kind of blow it up to see. I want to see the figure.
This is as big as I can get it, Ann. So
Okay. All right.
I'm circling the figure.
All right.
Okay.
So this is a suggestion of our isolation here at our homes, looking out. So all of these are figures looking out, looking towards the window. Well, not this one so much, but the other ones.
I love it. Just love that. Oh my gosh.
So this one is also a composite. This is actually quite interesting. This is very much based on a Hopper painting.
I was going to say, oh, yeah, it feels just like.
Although the window, this the building that you see through the window, I wanted a desolate city scene because cities are empty right now. There are no people in the city. And it just so happened that I was in Selma, Alabama about 3 or 4 years ago and shot the architecture, the buildings of Selma. Well, Selma is pretty empty. It's a desolate place. So I had these buildings on my hard drive. And anyway, that's from Selma. The interior was shot in Richmond at the Richmond Museum. And the woman is another photographer who actually sat for me. And I shot her in Massachusetts about a year ago. So this was composited from many different sources. And again, I did a lot of manipulation of colors and light and textures. This is my step-grandson. And the background was shot in Mexico, actually in January. It feels like 1,000 years ago that I was in, I can't believe it was only 3 months ago, but it feels like. That's my step-grandson. The birdcage was composited, as was actually all the pieces were composited. So he wasn't actually sitting there. The birdcage was shot somewhere else. The bird was shot somewhere else. And you can see through what was actually a mirror. That's Laycock Abbey, which is the home of Henry Fox Talbot, which I visited a couple years ago. I had a show there actually at the museum, and that's part of the museum of Henry Fox Talbot. So it's just a reference to the beginning of photography. Nobody will know that except for me. So this is the same building that was shot on the Cape, a decrepit building falling apart. The woman was shot elsewhere in Massachusetts, and the background is New York City. That's that same building, and again, the figure was from a different source. Oh, go back to that. So what I wanted to suggest in this is the idea of light pouring into the building, but the viewer who's standing away from that room has a much darker experience, but as you go towards the light, everything is much brighter. So I think it's a kind of hopeful message. And this, of course, is that same figure with a mask, which suggests the mask that doctors wore during the, well, they weren't really doctors, they were called plague doctors, but during the Black Plague, so-called doctors would visit the sick, and they wore masks as a way just to protect themselves, to protect their faces in the same way that we're wearing masks now. So this is a reference to that period, but also to what we're going through now, the idea of a mask. And the figure sitting on an old suitcase, again, is isolated in a room that has nothing in it, a sense of isolation. Same here, same idea here.
So once again, is anybody have some specific questions about this new work? Again, you can raise your hands, please. And if not, what I want to do is show you how some samples, some files of how this work is created. Yes, Angela.
How long does it take you to create in general? And have you noticed the difference in the amount of time it's taking with the old work versus the new work?
Oh, I can answer that. I don't know about you, Ann, but for me, I'm definitely much faster than I used to be. I used to spend several weeks on an image, but now I could probably complete an image within a week or so. But it's also because I get bored with working on one particular image, so I'm ready to move on to something else, especially now.
Do you come up with the concept and then find the photos to work that concept? Or does the concept change as you're building it?
For me, and you'll have to speak to that, but for me, the concept, I have an idea at the beginning of the process, but it always changes as I'm working with the images, because there's a relationship between the bits and pieces, the things you're compositing. They have to work together in a more or less seamless way. So it's very hard to anticipate ahead of time, for me, exactly how they're going to work together until I start moving the pieces around. So I let the process pretty much take over and dictate the way that the image flows and evolves. How about you?
That's basically, for me, early on too, is I come up with a shot list of the story I want to tell. I actually will diagram it or write it out. and then I'll begin that project or that shoot, and then then I throw it away in the trash can because
Yeah.
it never works out the way I think. But it's better. It's crazy that it's better, but I have to kind of narrow my choices. My goodness, there's so many options. You could go crazy, you know, with a squirrel here, a squirrel there. So I try to kind of package myself a little bit tighter in what I'm trying to say, and that helps. So, and sometimes I just like an image, but it doesn't say anything to me. So then I'll say, okay, what could this image say? Oh, I know. And then I know where I can go grab that. That's going to help me say this. So sometimes I don't have a clue, and I'll go back through my files like Fran does and find something and go, oh, this could say that. I like that, you know, and then work with it. And then as we just saw, the last image is completely not anything I've ever done before. And it's so not like my work in the past, but I really had something specific to say, and a reason to say it. And that is why this one is sharp, in focus, very clear, no muck, which I love all that. That's been the genre of my work since I've ever worked, was the dark or moody kind of, not a whole lot of sharpness. But this I had to say for a reason, and it belonged to a big show that I did called Seasons of Self. And so it's a huge self-portrait, and a new beginning for me. After I've done this work, it was cathartic, and it was a way to move past some things in my life and move forward to something brighter, lighter, different. And I don't know if I'll stay in this vein. I haven't yet, mainly because I can't shoot, and I have to have help. I have to have an assistant help me when I'm doing a shoot like this. This was difficult to do. So, and in the isolation, in the self-quarantine or whatever, I can't be with somebody, especially with MS. So I have to be careful about who I'm around. So anyway, I can't do that kind of work right now. So we'll just see what happens. If I continue in this vein, I don't know. But I don't know if that answered. Now I even forgot what the question was. I don't know. Right.
Answered.
Okay, good.
I just want to remind everybody, I have been getting a few chat messages that I'm noticing, but the easiest way is going to be if you'll just raise your hand, and then I'll unmute your microphone. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up these images from from Anne's piece. And if you remember, this piece was, we ended up here, but this is where we started. So if Anne, you would like to kind of like just walk us through some of this stuff, that would be absolutely wonderful.
So I I don't know how you say screenshotted, screenshotted. I don't know. I don't know how to say it. But anyway, that's what this is. So what I did was pull up the whole file, and I keep a master file of all my layers.
Yes.
And that's why my files are so big. But I didn't want to pick an image that I had so many layers we'd never get to the end of it. So so what I did is just unclick them all, and I just started from the very beginning, and then as we progress, each layer is turned on. I can't see what I wrote at the top.
Okay,
on my little phone.
the first one is duplicate and stretch fabric.
Oh yeah. So there was just one little piece of fabric on the ladder, and so I made it longer and bigger and worked on the shadow here. So you can go to the next one. Then now I add the pig and the pig's wings, and I don't know what I said up there, but
Add pig and overlay fabric.
yeah, so I wanted him to come through the fabric, not just to be flat on the fabric. So I had to stretch and warp and pull the fabric around him, and then make sure I created shadows that look like made it. You can't even see that, but if they weren't there, you would notice something was off. So the shadow thing we've talked about a little bit is really, really important.
Remove top of water horizon.
Oh yeah, so see, go to the, can you pop, well, I don't know, we'll see at the end, but there's a horizon change as well in this one as well. I don't know when I did it. That's my texture, okay. Now texture is a real good way to cheat, guys. I just have to tell you. If you're not really good at selecting or masking out or whatever, we'll just throw a layer on top of it. Nobody will notice.
Don't do that.
Don't tell the Photoshop snobs I said that.
And so now we've added the drunken friend.
Yeah, and now there's my friend drunk, and she was on the other end of the beach, and she was being silly. But anyway, so I just moved her over to the ladder.
That better sky with water horizon.
Yeah. So if you go back one, you can see that horizon, the water was barely visible, or you kind of maybe didn't even know it was there. And so I made that a little bit more significant and a better sky.
Curve layer to lighten according to sun direction.
That's right. So back off one and then back, and then take it back so you can see what happens to the light. And so I knew that the sun, and you can always tell by your shadows. So I knew that the light was coming from the right. And so I wanted to make it feel more real by bringing the sky lighter on the right side and the pig in the front in his face.
Overall brighten with curves.
Yeah. And then maybe I thought it didn't need to be that bright. So I can't remember what did I say there?
Fix fabric, clean up, and tone.
Yeah. So I do a curve tone to kind of bring down, to kind of give it more warmth.
So the fact that we start here and end up here, it's pretty crazy to me.
It's the software, really. It's because somebody's really smart that invented this program.
That is true. But you still have to know how to use it, especially
that's the work.
for this work.
And Fran and I were talking the other day when we were talking about doing this. And, you know, I'm self-taught, so I didn't go to a school for art. You know, I'm a nurse. I didn't do all that. I feel very robbed, I guess you would say, for not being able to have all those wonderful things that in education. But when I don't know how to do something, what's so cool now is that you can go to Google or YouTube or any of these, lynda.com, which is now I think linkedin.com, or LinkedIn Learning, I think now they changed the name. But you can get on a subscription, or you can just Google and find out, okay, how do I add an object to fabric? I could type that in, and there's going to be somebody who's got more time on their hands than I do to sit down and write down exactly how to do it. So once I do it and I do it again, then I can kind of remember how. So that's kind of my process of how I've learned how to do this.
So now we're going to move on to one of Fran's images.
So Bob, what you can do is just sort of click through it very quickly. I don't need to talk about it because this was created as a little animation. So just hit the arrow pretty fast so you can see how things develop over time.
Oh.
So that's the final one. So those are all the different pieces that I went through.
So I'm going to run through this one again for everybody.
Okay.
Crazy.
The finished one.
Yep, that's the final one. That's called
So-
Butterfly Boy.
So here's another image.
Oh,
And again, you can go through it the same way. So I can just talk a little bit about this. So these are different iterations. Stop right here for a second. So I wanted to continue her arm. So I did, using a different layer, I sketched out where I thought the arm should go. So that's just for me. So that was my guideline. And then you'll see how
Fran, I'm going to interrupt. I think if you turn the volume off on your computer, your speaker, it's going to help us.
but then you can't hear me, right?
No, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I can't hear you.
Oh. Well, then maybe turn it back on. I'm sorry. You seem to be getting an echo somewhere.
Yeah, I hear it too. Okay, here, I'll turn it off when I speak. So this was just created as a guide for me so that when I manipulated the hand and the bird, I knew what position to put them in.
Do you mind my asking how long does it take you to do something like this? For example, like all of these stages, what's the time period over which you are doing this?
I probably worked on this over a week and a half or so. I
Okay.
did it quite a long time ago, but I suspect it was many, many days. But again, you can see the guides that I'm using.
I'm sorry, there's two of you talking. There's a weird effect happening and I didn't make out what you were just saying.
All right, I don't know why that is.
Could you just say?
So these are guides. I fill in the colors just to give me a sense of where the actual object should go. Can you hear that okay?
Oh, yes, I could hear that. Thank you.
Okay. So when you make a composite and you're compositing lots of pieces, for example, to a figure, you have to think very carefully about the proportion and how things fit together. And in this case, the arm and the face and the body all came from different sources. So that's really the challenge, is making it look as if they're all connected.
So again, just pretty remarkable. I don't know how you do it. It's just
A lot of trial and error.
so beyond me with all this work, you know, for the two of you that you're able to do is I've been amazed from day one when I met but I actually met Fran at a portfolio review. It's got to be maybe 15 years ago. And to see this work now, I still am always amazed at what they're able to do and how you do it.
Well, I think
So,
what's interesting, Bob, is that Ann and I are both moving in very different directions from where we started.
yes.
And
It's
Ann,
true.
I see your work is becoming in some ways more refined. And my work is kind of going in the opposite direction. My work is becoming more cinematic, just by contrast, I guess. So
Deeper
whereas
color.
your more refined, specific, mine seems to be moving in a, I'm more interested, seem to be more interested in bold colors, and I'm more
Yeah.
interested in simplifying. My images are more simplified, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, yours are more complex.
It's interesting. It's I'm glad I got out of my dark period though. And then if any of you want to look at that work, the 3 chapters of illumination, it's on my website. But it's dark. It's Southern Gothic. It's deep and it's dark, and it reflected a time in my life. And so it's interesting that I don't know about you, Fran. Well, I'm sure we have had this conversation before about us collecting inspiration. And I went through my inspired files, like I'll snapshot something on my phone of someone else's work and put it in my folder. And sometimes when I can't sleep, I'll just start going through the files. It was amazing what I collect now as inspiration versus what I collected then. It's very interesting, and I don't think about it. I just have changed what I see that inspires me. Something's changed, and that's a good thing, I think. So I loved my work back then, still do, but it's not what I want to do now.
I'm the same way. So the artists that I'm very inspired by now are, I really love the Dutch masters, but back as far as Caravaggio, who wasn't Dutch, but who influenced the Dutch masters. So I'm getting a lot out of Caravaggio's work, and then the Dutch. And I love Gregory Klutz's work, and I love Edward Hopper. And
I can see that, yeah.
Cinematographers. So I'm trying to mush all of those influences together. And I don't know where it's going. It's just kind of, right now, it just feels like a minestrone of my mind of all these different influences. And I'm trying. I'm trying lots of different directions, but right now I'm limited with what I can actually work with because I don't
But
have.
it doesn't look like you're limited, Fran. It looks like you've been able to really dig deep and come up with some very inspiring images.
Well, I feel like I'm cannibalizing my files, but at some point I'm going to run out of them. Use them all.
Somehow I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, we'll
Maybe
send
they'll
you
get
some
out of their
files.
prison by then.
Yeah.
Fran, we'll send you some files. I've gotten actually a couple chat questions that I think I will try and, I will ask. And one of them came from Bobby Lane. Hi, Bobby. Says this last image is a very different color palette than the others, and I'm assuming that this would be the image that Bobby is talking about, because it truly does have quite a different palette than any of these. And so I guess the question would be, was there a reason for that?
Not
That would be
really.
for Fran.
If that's the one she's referring to. No, but first of all, it looks a little bit duller on the computer that I'm looking at now than the one that I used to create the image. The one that I used to create it, the birdcage should just be a little bit brighter, and she's holding a globe, which is glowing. but for some reason it's not, I think because it was compressed too much when I sent it to you. So this is a little bit more lugubrious than I had intended it. But also remember, I was making this, a couple of weeks ago during this period of time when, I've gone through many different feelings, as we all have, the stages of grief and depression and trying to get to acceptance about the period. So this was probably one of my more depressive states. Also, the figure, by the way, is many, many different figures. So the face actually comes from I believe, a 17th or 18th century painting. The jacket comes from a different source. The arms and the torso are my daughter's, and the skirt and the legs are from a model that I shot in Mexico a couple months ago. So she's many, many different people, and I had to find a way to integrate all of the pieces. So I might have desaturated the various different colors at the time in order to make it work. But honestly, I can't remember.
Yeah, and there's another question from Pat Robinson. Hi, Pat. Do you make your own textures or use a specific set of filters? I
If
think
it's
that would
me,
be for the both of you.
well, I make my own textures just by shooting textures. It's very easy to do. What about you, Anne?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
use my own. There's really no reason I see to really pay for them. They're all around you. I'll tell you one texture that I used on all of my work in the 3 chapter series was a rug, and I photographed a rug, and that's what went on all the work. Pull up the down and out image with the wolf mask, Bob, if you can. And let's see, I'm trying to, there's a hole in the rug somewhere. I think, see, it's an old rug. And so there, see right there, the little, yeah. And you can also see I didn't do a very good job of taking it off the corner of her sleeve. Oops.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
So my husband makes fun of me because when we were in China,
Yeah, there it is.
Uh-oh, Anne.
I know.
You shouldn't have told, because nobody would ever notice it.
Yeah, don't tell the people that bought it.
So, and my husband makes fun of me because when we were in China a couple years ago, instead of shooting the landscapes and the buildings and stuff, I would go up to walls with floors. So most of my textures, so I was very interested in walls or the graffiti on the wall.
I know it makes the people watching us do that kind of stuff go, oh my gosh, she's got to be loony. That is,
It's
yeah,
really true.
I know. So one trick that I have on the textures, and in case my phone gives out, I've enjoyed all this just in case I lose y'all by battery, but is if you, I don't know how many of you are into Photoshop or have any experience with it, but if you put in a texture over your image, you can select the part out that you don't want to see the texture on, but you still need the tone of the texture. So if you select that on the texture layer, you can Gaussian blur that. And so the texture will go away, but the tone of the texture will remain. And that's been real helpful in using a lot of textures in the way I work.
Well, this is a perfect segue into something, just a little break. Fran and Anne have talked about, and we're trying to figure out how to present an online tutorial and workshop for people that would be interested in learning how you go about, how you do this stuff. I may have to take it because I've always asked Fran and she won't tell me how you do these shadows and reflections. It's just beyond me. But we are working on developing and scheduling a workshop. So if anybody is interested in that, please reach out to me, send me an email, bob at bobcornimaging.com, bob@bobcornimaging.com, and let me know you'd be interested in it so we can be in touch as we get this all together. So I just wanted to put that little plug in for everybody. But any other questions that people may have, please either raise your hand, or if you're savvy with Zoom, just unmute yourself, since I've muted you all. Anything, anybody?
Well, Bob, thank you for the opportunity. This has been a lot of fun.
Well,
Sure
I'm
have.
so
And-
glad we could do that. And for just everybody, I do some little shameless self-promotion with all of this. The thing that I can say, making these prints for Fran and Ann, is the fact that with photography, and we always talk about this, how it's light. Light exposes a light sensitive material, and the way that the two of them are able to take something that they've created, all from separate images, and understand how to work with light. As somebody who's, only does printing, and it's all about the light and how it's represented on a print and on paper, the fact that they are doing this is really just quite remarkable. So again, I want to thank Fran and Ann for sharing this with everybody. Our next gallery talk will be next Thursday, which will be May 7th, and that will be with David Burnett. David Burnett, for those of you who don't know, is considered one of the 100 most influential photographers in history. And David's a photojournalist and had a show of David's here. So he will be joining us next week, 4 to 6, just like Fran and Ann have done today. So that information will be posted on Facebook, Instagram, and then also on my website in my little news section. So that's it for me in my shameless self-promotion. But again, thank all of you who joined us today. And once again, before we do end this, if anybody does have a question, I ask you to do it now. I'm just getting a few comments from people. Thank you so much. It was great, beautiful images. Oh, great Zoom meeting with you. Thanks. This was great. Thank you. Inspiring. Images are amazing. So imaginative. Thank you. The new directions from both of you are sensational. Thank you. Fascinating. Wonderful presentation. Great presentation. Good to see everybody. Oh, that's from Greg. So again, thank you all. Really appreciate it and look forward.
I bet. I know one
Later.
person.
Hopefully you get your internet back.
I know. Gosh,
And-
tomorrow, hopefully.
And great. Well, thank you all. And Fran, thank you. Again, thank you for everybody that joined. And look forward to seeing you all again, and hopefully tell all your friends next week for David Burnett. And just once again, if you are interested in a workshop with Fran and Ann, please get a hold of me. You can call 508-255-5202, or again, email bob@bobcornimaging.com, and we'll get you on the list and we'll keep you posted. Again, thank you all.
Bye.
Be safe, be well.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.